predictable way. And the radioactive dating with uranium and lead is effectively based on the half-life of the uranium and how much lead we have and how much uranium we had, and making the assumption, which is accepted by anyone who has worked with this as valid, is that if we start with the uranium and see how much of it is now daughter lead, we know how much time it took for those uranium atoms to convert to lead. And that basis irrefutably gives consistent data, and that technology, as opposed to some of the others, is quite good. That does not mean that someone can misread it, just as much as I have had people stick a thermometer in my mouth and tell me that I had a fever, and I read it and it says at 98.7. And I know, well, I must have read it wrong. Well, that human error is present everywhere. But the procedure, when done under controlled conditions and by a number of labs, consistently converge on about a 4.5, 4.6 for the Earth, not for the universe. The universe is, say, about 4 times older. And yes, you can come up with data that are wrong, and they're thrown out because they're garbage.
Okay, the best illustration of the dating methods, uranium, lead, potassium, argon, whichever one they want to use, would be the illustration if you walked into a room and a candle was burning on the table. And I asked you the question, when was it lit? Well, you could measure the rate of burn and find out that the candle is currently burning 1 inch per hour. And if the candle is 6 inches tall and it's burning at 1 inch an hour, and I ask you the question, when was it lit? You could tell me when it will go out. It'll go out in 6 hours. But you can only tell me when it was lit if you were allowed 2 assumptions. Number 1, you would have to assume an initial height. How tall was it? We don't know. Number 2, you would have to assume that that rate of burn has remained constant for the entire time it's been burning. Based on those 2 assumptions, you could give a reasonable answer. But if either assumption is wrong, your answer is wrong. So all of the dating methods are based on 7 assumptions, all of which I hold to be faulty. I have them all listed on my chart over here. You're welcome to come look at it afterwards. They are assuming that all of the lead in the sample is daughter lead, as he illustrated. We don't know that. It may have been created half lead, half uranium. So the lava coming from volcanoes is frequently dated. Matter of fact, Leakey's skulls were dated, not his personal skulls, the ones that he found. Leakey's discoveries were dated using the lava that they were in, the lava in the same strata, using potassium argon. And yet I can give you many references. I don't have them with me. I have them over at the church, but references of where potassium argon, uranium, lead dating methods have proven to be wildly wrong because the initial assumptions determine your outcome. It could easily have been created recently with a certain quantity of uranium or lead. The very fact that we have radiopolonium halos, which would be pretty technical for this audience, but the very fact that they exist in granite rock indicates that the Earth was created cold, not hot. It did not cool down, and I have plenty of information on that. As far as, well, I've got 100 other things we've kind of glossed over here, but you said that it irrefutably shows the Earth to be 4.6 billion years old. Well, that's irrefutably assuming, or based on the assumptions that you accept. You are accepting the thought that there was no lead or uranium present in a mixture to begin with, and that all of the lead is daughter lead, and that the sample has remained pure. I would contend, and I think could easily show, matter of fact, I may have that book with me, where of the 19,000 dating methods done in a survey, they did a survey of 19,000 dating methods. I believe only 1,000 was considered acceptable because the others fell outside of the expected date based on the geologic column. And therefore, the information was not published. So the only dates that get published are the ones that are politically correct based on the current evolutionary theory. If something goes wrong, if a laboratory comes up with a wildly different age, it will not make it into the accepted publications because that might cause the common people to realize that they're not as unified in their belief as they would like them to think. If the stars are billions of light years away, and we do not know that they are, but let's assume that they are, and they may very well be. We only know up to 60 or 100 light years based on parallax trigonometry. So the first thing you have to realize is we do not know the distance to the stars. There may be some that are billions of light years away, and there probably are. But I would say from a creationist standpoint that if the God that I worship is able to create the stars, he could certainly create the star light already in place. He made them to be a light on the earth, the book of Genesis tells us, so he made the stars and the light at the same time. Third thing we need to realize is that we do not know that the speed of light is a constant. It may have gone faster in the past. Light may have been infinitely fast in the past. We do not know that it's a constant. I can easily prove that it's not a constant. They talk about the Doppler effect of light, the red shift. Well, that proves light is not constant. If you're in a car driving down the highway going 60 miles an hour and you flip your headlights on, is the light from your headlights going the speed of light plus 60? The speed of light is not necessarily a constant, 186,000 miles per second, and it could very well have been that the speed of light has been decaying. We would not notice it much now if we're on the tail end of the logarithmic curve because it begins to taper out toward near flat. We also would not notice it because most of our measuring instruments when I was in physics class in high school, we measured the speed of light in the hallway with rotating mirrors and a laser, which is not a real accurate way to do it, but we got close. And the more accurate ways involve atomic clocks. And if, for your time factor, and if the speed of light is decaying, it may be also at the same time throwing off our atomic clocks at the same rate. Therefore, you would not notice a decline. There's been some very reputable, reasonable research on that very question, is the speed of light a constant? And so far, it's still up for grabs, but there are a number of people who say, no, light is not constant.
To go the question to, on the other side, if evolution is true, and several pointed this up, why are there not hundreds of skeletons of various stages of man rather than just a few partial skeletons?
Well, just as I say, preservation of an organism is an accident. It shouldn't happen. The only time that a fossil is formed, be it human or otherwise, is when the remains are preserved by a catastrophic entrapment, usually in the absence of oxygen. Man is superior in his abilities to, he also inhabits the atmospheric, well, let's simply say the terrestrial environment, breathing air, and not swimming around in the bottom of the swamp where he might be preserved along with a log. We do find remains. We also have, as a result of theological views, the idea that has persisted for a long time relative to an afterlife. And we have done things with those bodies. In some cases, we have cremated them. That eliminates the fossil part rather nicely. Most burial types, particularly in the early, we'll say the Old Testament, the Jewish religion, you bury them quickly without preservation. That encourages no fossils. Now, I cannot say what's going to be here when we have all these glass encased, the preserve the body bit, the sort of the Renaissance of the Egyptians bit where you kill the slaves and put food in there and music and the whole schmear in the hope that they'll have all that stuff. Even there they ended up getting looted. But fundamentally, that should happen with other organisms. We have teeming hordes of creatures, mostly arthropods, that have one purpose, and that is destroying the decaying remains of the dead.
Another question that kind of comes up here, and we have the skeleton remains of, seems like a lot of dinosaurs that were here millions of years ago that have, but we don't have the skeletons of the man that were here millions of years ago.
That's largely